All right, let's dive into some classic philosophy today.
Sounds fun.
We're going to be looking at an excerpt from Plato's dialogue, Euthyphro.
Ooh, Plato.
Yeah, and it's way more exciting than it might sound at first.
Okay.
So just picture this. Ancient Athens, right outside the courthouse where they deal with all the religious offenses.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a pretty big deal back then.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So what's going on?
Well, that's where we find Socrates
Of course.
and this guy named Euthyphro.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating is the way this dialogue is written. It's like we're eavesdropping on their conversation.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and Euthyphro is there for a pretty shocking reason.
What's that?
He's actually there to prosecute his own father for murder.
Whoa, hold on. His own father.
Yeah, you heard that right. His own father.
That's intense. I mean, talk about family drama.
Right. And so naturally, Socrates, who is always up for a good philosophical debate,
Always.
he sees this as like the perfect opportunity to pick Euthyphro's brain about this idea of piety.
I can just imagine Socrates' eyes lighting up.
Yeah, exactly. He's probably thinking, okay, here's a guy who's willing to take his own dad to court over, a moral issue.
Yeah,
He must have a pretty strong understanding of what's right and wrong.
you'd think so, yeah.
So Socrates, being Socrates, starts grilling Euthyphro about what piety actually means.
Okay, so this is where it gets good.
Yeah, this is where the dialogue gets really fun because it's like a verbal tennis match.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, with Socrates like returning every definition that Euthyphro throws at him.
Oh, this is going to be interesting.
So the first definition that Euthyphro offers is pretty straightforward.
Okay, let's hear it.
He says, piety is doing what I'm doing, prosecuting wrongdoers, regardless of who they are.
So, like a strict sense of justice, no exceptions?
Yeah, sounds pretty logical at first, right?
Hmm.
But, like any good philosopher, Socrates spots a hole in that logic right away.
Oh, I bet he does.
He's like, hold on a second. What about all those stories about the gods?
Oh, here we go.
They're always fighting and disagreeing, and even they can't seem to agree on what's right and wrong.
Good point.
Yeah, and to really drive this home, Socrates brings up some pretty wild examples from Greek mythology.
Like what?
Well, for instance, there's the story of Zeus chaining up his own father, Kronos,
Oh, yeah, Kronos.
who, let's just say, wasn't exactly father of the year.
Right, not a great guy.
So Socrates asks, is that a pious act, even though it means harming a parent?
Yeah, it gets complicated.
And then they start talking about, different opinions on how to deal with murderers.
Okay.
Some people say immediate execution, others say, no. There needs to be a more, thoughtful approach.
Yeah, it's a tough question.
So Socrates' point is, if even the gods can't agree on what's just,
Right.
then how can any one person,
Uh,
even someone like Euthyphro who thinks he's got it all figured out,
Yeah.
how can they claim to know for sure?
I'm starting to see how Socrates operates.
Yeah.
He's using these really pointed questions and examples to expose the flaws in, Euthyphro's kind of simplistic understanding of piety.
Exactly. And it's brilliant.
It is. And this is why we still talk about the Socratic method today, right?
Absolutely.
It's all about challenging assumptions and getting to the core of an idea.
I love it. So Euthyphro, I imagine he's feeling a little flustered at this point.
Probably.
He tries to, refine his definition a little bit.
Okay, what does he say now?
This time he says, piety is what is dear to the gods. Interesting.
But guess what? Socrates finds a problem with that one, too.
Of course he does. Come on, this is Socrates. He's going to find a problem with everything.
Exactly.
But what's the issue this time?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
If piety is just about doing what the gods like, then wouldn't that mean that morality becomes totally arbitrary?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Because it would all depend on the whims of these, powerful, often unpredictable beings.
It's like what one god loves, another might absolutely hate. Exactly. So how are we supposed to figure out what's truly pious if the gods themselves can't even agree?
Yeah, poor Euthyphro. He's back to square one.
Right. Back to the drawing board. So Euthyphro, he's got to be getting a little frustrated.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be in his sandals right now.
But he's persistent. He gives it another go.
All right, third time's the charm. What does he come up with?
This time, he says piety is what all the gods love.
Okay, so maybe if they can all agree on something, we're getting somewhere.
Right. Find some common ground.
Sounds reasonable enough, right? But, well, this is where I think Socrates really shines,
Yeah.
He points out something really clever. He says, if something is loved by the gods because it is pious, then that means piety has to exist kind of independently of the gods. you know?
Oh, so it's like saying a good deed is good whether or not a god does it.
Exactly. There's something inherently good about it.
Okay, okay, that makes
But
sense.
then he flips it around.
Oh, I bet he does.
He says, okay, let's say something is pious simply because the gods love it.
Then what?
Well, then we're stuck in this kind of circular argument.
Yeah.
It's like saying what's loved is loved because it's loved.
It's like a dog chasing its tail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually tell us anything about what makes something pious.
So we're back to square one again?
Pretty much. Euthyphro, I can only imagine the look on his face.
Yeah, probably sweating a little bit under Socrates' gaze.
He decides to change things up completely.
Oh, really? After all that?
Yeah, he says, all right, forget what the gods love. Let's look at it another way. He says piety is it's a part of justice,
Okay.
specifically the part that attends to the gods.
Attends to the gods. What does that even mean?
Right. Like, do the gods need our help? Are they, helpless without us humans?
Wait, are we saying the gods are like dependent on us or something?
Well, that's exactly the point Socrates is getting at.
I see.
He's challenging this idea that our actions can somehow, benefit these all-powerful beings, and if they don't really need our service, then what's all this attending about? What's the end goal here?
So if it's not about like practically helping them,
Right.
is it more like showing respect? Or maybe trying to please them in some way?
That's one way to look at it.
Yeah,
Euthyphro, he's grasping at straws at this point, I think.
I can imagine.
He offers up this final definition of piety.
What's he say?
He says it's learning how to please the gods
Okay.
through prayers and sacrifices.
That sounds a lot like how, many religions operate today.
It does, doesn't it?
But is that really all there is to it?
Well, the interesting thing is Socrates never really rejects this final definition outright.
So we're just left hanging after all that back and forth?
It's more like, I think Plato's using Socrates to show us that, defining something like piety,
Uh-huh.
it's a lot harder than it seems at first glance.
Oh, so there might not be one, neat and tidy answer.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of the point.
It's like he's encouraging us to grapple with these questions ourselves. To not just settle for easy answers.
I like that.
And this is what makes this dialogue so valuable, even today.
Yeah.
It pushes us to think critically about our own beliefs.
What do we consider right and wrong, and why?
Exactly.
Are we just following tradition?
Yeah.
Or have we really thought it through?
It brings us to this really important concept that's kind of at the heart of the Euthyphro dilemma,
Which is?
divine command theory.
Okay, what's that?
It's basically the idea that what's morally right is whatever God commands.
So if God says it's good, it's good.
In a nutshell, yeah. But, as Socrates shows us, this can get really tricky really fast.
How so?
Well, if morality is just about blindly following orders from a higher power, then what happens if those orders seem, immoral?
That's a tough one.
Does it mean our own sense of right and wrong is completely irrelevant?
I guess it depends on how much weight you give to divine authority.
Exactly.
It seems like Socrates is pushing us to, develop our own internal compass.
To not just outsource our morality to someone else.
Even a god.
Yeah, that's a pretty radical idea for the time.
It is. But it's also incredibly powerful.
So we've been talking about ancient Greece and, all this philosophy, and you might be thinking, what does any of this have to do with me? Why should I care about this stuff?
It's a fair question.
It was thousands of years ago.
Right.
And that's what's so cool about these, classic philosophical works.
Yeah.
They raise these questions that are just as relevant today as they were back then.
I think that's so true.
Give me an example.
Okay, so let's say you're faced with a law that you think is totally unjust, Do you follow it because it's the law? Or do you go against it based on your own sense of what's right?
Oh, wow, I see what you mean.
It's a real Euthyphro situation.
It is. You have to decide, where your ultimate allegiance lies, right?
With the rules or with your own conscience?
Exactly.
Or what about, the debates we have today about religion?
And, the role of religion in public life. Should religious beliefs be influencing government policies? Or should we be striving for, a secular society?
Can you imagine Socrates and Euthyphro arguing about that?
Oh, absolutely.
Euthyphro would be all about religious law and Socrates.
Oh, yeah.
He'd be questioning everything.
Poking holes in his logic left and right.
Exactly.
Oh, I like it.
Okay, here's another one. Think about artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Can we program a machine to be ethical?
That's a good one.
Can it understand piety? Can it understand justice?
It's like the Euthyphro dilemma on steroids.
It is. It really is.
So even though this dialogue was written, centuries ago, it's still making us think about the world in new ways.
Absolutely.
It reminds us that there aren't always easy answers to these big questions.
Right.
But the process, like the struggle to understand them, that's what's important.
It's about the journey,
Yeah.
The back and forth, the question.
Like Socrates is, whispering to us from across the ages saying,
I love that image.
keep asking why.
Yes.
Don't be afraid to challenge the way things are.
Never stop questioning.
Trust your own reasoning.
And that's the real legacy of the Euthyphro.
It's not about finding the perfect definition of piety.
No.
It's about the process of trying to figure it out.
Exactly.
Well, I think we did a pretty good job of unpacking all of this.
Yeah, I think so too. We covered a lot of ground.
We talked about like the complexities of piety, the whole, divine command theory thing.
We even brought up AI.
We did, yeah. And hopefully, this deep dive left you with more questions than answers.
In a good way, of course.
In the best way possible, yeah.
It's all about keeping those minds curious, right?
I didn't.
And until next time.